It began with a flicker of red on my screen. A single cell in the bottom corner of an old spreadsheet turned crimson when I sorted the year-end totals. For a second, I thought it was a glitch, the kind that happens when formulas break. But when I clicked, the number didn't lie. It was my name attached to a deduction I'd never entered. I leaned closer, scrolling through line after line. The farther I went, the more the pattern emerged, quiet, deliberate, organized. Someone had relabeled expenses, created mirror entries, folded my bookkeeping into a web that wasn't mine. The signature column showed E. Ward Consulting, Ethan's firm. My stomach tightened. I hadn't opened these files since before he left. Outside, the streetlights buzzed against the kitchen window. I kept hearing the hum of the refrigerator, steady, judgmental. Every sound felt louder because the house was so empty now. When Ethan walked out 8 months ago, he left only silence and a list of reasons that sounded like apologies. "We're just on different paths," he'd said. I didn't realize his path included my bank account. I scrolled again, tracing each date. March 5th, April 12th, June 2nd. They weren't random. They lined up perfectly with the weeks he claimed to be handling the quarterly taxes. My hand trembled as I grabbed the notebook beside me and started writing each entry down, page after page. The pen left grooves in the paper. Every cell felt like a bruise I hadn't noticed until someone pressed it. When I finally leaned back, my neck stiff, I stared at the totals. 98,700 and something. Nearly $100,000 missing through adjustments. I whispered the number aloud as if saying it might make it less absurd. It didn't. The air felt heavier, and I could taste metal at the back of my tongue. My first instinct was to call him, ask for an explanation, something logical. He was always the logical one. He used that tone that made everyone believe him, even me. But the phone stayed on the counter. I knew exactly how that call would go. He'd laugh softly, call me dramatic, maybe end with, "Claire, you're overreacting again." Overreacting. The word that once made me doubt my sanity. Instead, I opened a new folder on my desktop, Review 2020. The cursor blinked like a pulse. I copied every suspicious file into it one at a time. With each transfer, my breathing steadied. By the time the folder filled, I wasn't shaking anymore. I was calculating. Around midnight, I made tea I didn't drink. The kettle's whistle was too sharp and I turned it off halfway. My reflection in the dark window looked unfamiliar, shoulders slightly hunched, eyes sharper than they used to be. That woman staring back wasn't the same one who trusted Ethan to manage their future. The spreadsheet waited, open, patient. I printed the first 3 pages, the whir of the printer, the only sound in the house. Each page slid out like an accusation. Somewhere between page 4 and 5, a memory surfaced. Ethan standing behind me last spring, his hand on my shoulder as he leaned toward the monitor. "You don't need to worry about this stuff," he'd said. "Just focus on your clients. I've got the rest handled." I'd smiled, grateful. I remember the faint smell of his cologne, the way he kissed my hair before closing the laptop. Now every word felt rehearsed, every gesture a transaction. I placed the printouts in a manila folder. On the tab I wrote verification. The word felt safer than evidence. By 1 a.m., fatigue crept in. My head throbbed, but I couldn't walk away. I checked the savings account balance again, even though I already knew what I'd see. The screen confirmed it drained almost to the cent. The same total reflected in the expenses column he'd altered. He'd converted trust into arithmetic. I shut the laptop. The click echoed like a door closing somewhere far away. For a long moment, I just sat there, hands clasped, listening to the house breathe. Then, without planning it, I opened a fresh notebook. Page 1, Audit Plan. Step 1, Identify anomalies. Step 2, Collect proof. Step 3, Stay quiet. The third line wasn't strategy, it was survival. Ethan thrived on attention on chaos. If he knew I'd found this, he'd spin a story before I could take a breath. So I would do what he never expected: stay silent, deliberate, invisible. I flipped off the kitchen light and walked upstairs. The moonlight traced thin lines across the hallway walls. Passing the bedroom, I caught sight of the empty dresser top where his cufflink box once sat. For the first time, I didn't feel anger, just distance. He'd stolen money, yes, but also noise. My nights were quieter now. Maybe too quiet, but they belonged to me. I left the printed pages on the dining table. Tomorrow I'd call Marcy. She'd know how to confirm the data trail without alerting anyone. She always said, paper tells the truth, people won't. Tonight, that truth was beginning to speak. Downstairs, the printer light blinked green, waiting. I pressed print all. The hum filled the room again, steady, mechanical, relentless. By the time the last sheet fell onto the tray, I knew this wasn't just about lost money. It was about everything I'd signed, every sentence I'd swallowed, every instinct I'd second-guessed. Numbers can't lie, but people can. And Ethan Ward was fluent in fiction. I gathered the pages, stacked them neatly, and placed my palm over the top sheet as if sealing a promise. My hand didn't shake this time. Tomorrow the audit would begin, not for the IRS, not even for him, but for me. The next morning I woke before the alarm. The sky outside was the dull gray that never decides if it wants to rain or clear. I made coffee strong enough to sting and sat down at the kitchen table where last night's printouts waited like ghosts. Marcy once said, "The most dangerous lies hide in routine." Maybe that's why I'd never seen this before. Ethan's deceit wore the same shape as our life. Bill statements, spreadsheets, polite signatures. I opened my laptop and went back into the archives. The cursor blinked like a heartbeat. Each click opened another layer, folders nested inside folders, dated, labeled, confident. Ethan had always been organized. That was the irony. Every crime documented perfectly. By mid-morning, I found the first duplicate invoice. Same client name, same date, but one version billed through my account, another through his. I enlarged the signature box, zoomed in until the pixels blurred. My own name stared back at me, curved and graceful, the way I used to sign it before my hands started shaking around him. But it wasn't mine. I remembered the pen. He preferred a dark blue Mont Blanc. Looks more professional, he'd say. I wondered if that was the same pen he'd used to forge me. The clock ticked past 10. My coffee had gone cold. I started taking screenshots, evidence folder time-stamped. Every file felt like another breath taken back from him. Halfway through, I hesitated. What if this was somehow a mistake? What if there was an explanation buried under the rage? I almost wanted to believe that, because believing otherwise meant accepting that the man I'd loved for 12 years had built his comfort out of my trust. I tried calling Marcy, straight to voicemail. She was likely buried in client work. I didn't leave a message. I didn't trust my voice yet. Instead, I went to the filing cabinet in the corner. 3 drawers of history receipts, statements, the paper trail of a life. I pulled out the joint accounts folder. Every document smelled faintly of toner and lemon cleaner. Each sheet was a small betrayal I hadn't recognized when it arrived in the mail. I found one labeled Tax Year 2020, Adjustments. Inside, stapled to a letter I didn't remember signing, was an authorization form. My name again. Perfect cursive. The notary stamp real. The signature fake. The air in the kitchen changed denser somehow. I pressed the paper flat with my fingertips and felt my pulse in my wrist. This wasn't incompetence, it was a plan. A memory surfaced Ethan at his desk, glasses low on his nose, saying, "You sign, I'll scan." I'd laughed thinking it was a small domestic efficiency, not a transaction of identity. Now I saw the rhythm of it all. I'd trusted, he'd collected. I'd signed, he'd erased. At noon, I stepped outside for air. The neighborhood was quiet, lawns, trimmed mail trucks humming, the kind of calm that feels almost staged. I watched a couple walk their dog and wondered if they looked like Ethan and me once did, composed, ordinary, invisible in their dysfunction. My phone buzzed with an unknown number. I didn't answer. A text followed. "Claire, it's Ethan. Need to clear up something about the 2020 forms." My thumb hovered over delete, but I didn't press it. I took a screenshot instead. Evidence. Back inside, I replayed his words in my head. Clear up something. He wasn't apologizing, he was containing. That was his way. Control the story before anyone else could tell it. I opened another folder. E. Ward Consulting. Transfers. The spreadsheet columns were familiar dates, vendor names, memos. But next to each consulting fee were initials mine. He'd coded me into his fraud like a ghost signature. My breath shortened. I started writing a list of anomalies, totals, fake vendors, recurring account numbers. The same digits repeated every fourth entry, his pattern of hiding. When my eyes blurred, I looked up and saw the sunlight shifting across the counter, illuminating a small crack in the mug beside me. I hadn't noticed it before. Maybe it had always been there, hairline thin, widening quietly. That was our marriage in one image, fine until light hit it right. At 2 p.m., Marcy called back. Her voice was steady, brisk, the way she got when something serious surfaced. "Claire, I'm coming by," she said. "You don't have to." "I do." The line clicked off. When she arrived, she took one look at the stacks of paper and exhaled through her nose. "You always did keep good records," she said, pulling on her reading glasses. I watched her flip through the invoices. "He forged these looks that way." "Then you don't call him. You document, you archive, and you don't make a sound." Her calm steadied me. She pulled out her phone, photographing each page. "Keep copies in the cloud, not just your drive," she said. "And Claire, don't underestimate what this means. If he used your name for filings, that's fraud under your signature." The words landed heavy but clear. Fraud under my name. Marcy squeezed my shoulder once before leaving. "We'll handle this the quiet way, but you need proof first. All of it." When she left, I sat back at the table, the house settling into its silence again. Outside, the gray sky had shifted to pale yellow. The color of endings or beginnings, I wasn't sure which. I opened one last document before shutting down for the night. In the metadata hidden under last modified, I saw his username, Eward Admin. The timestamp matched the week he told me he was working late on our future. I almost laughed. It wasn't funny, but there was a strange relief in certainty. The truth no longer floated now. It had a name, a date, a trail. I created a new folder called Phase 1. Inside it, I saved every file, every screenshot, every note. The sound of the mouse clicking became a rhythm, like stitching a torn seam. By the time I was done, the clock read 7:12 p.m. I stood up, stretched, and looked at the stack of printed pages. They didn't scare me anymore. They were evidence, and evidence was power. Tomorrow I'd start tracing the shell companies. Tonight I'd let myself breathe. But as I turned off the light, my phone buzzed again. Another message, same number. You're making a mistake. I didn't reply. The silence was answer enough. 3 days passed before the letter came. It was a thick white envelope with the IRS seal identical to the one that had started this whole unraveling. The mail carrier left it wedged between a grocery coupon booklet and a utility bill so ordinary it might have gone unnoticed if my name hadn't been printed in all caps. Claire M. Hensley, followed by the phrase that made my stomach lurch, "Attention Compliance Review Department." I didn't open it right away. It sat on the kitchen counter beside the coffee pot, while I finished washing the dishes, drying the same plate twice, because I couldn't bring myself to break the seal. I knew whatever was inside would confirm what I already suspected. Still seeing it in black and white would make it real. The envelope felt heavier than paper should. I slid it open with a butter knife, careful as if the blade might cut through my composure too. Inside were 4 sheets, an audit notice, a list of discrepancies, and 2 forms marked "Immediate Response Required." At the top of the first page, "Joint Filing 2020. Both our names." His signature, my forged one. For a second, my vision blurred. Then everything sharpened painfully, the ink, the indentation of letters pressed into the paper, the date. April 15th, the same week Ethan had left for that conference in Denver. I sat down before my knees gave out. Every line of the notice read like a confession he'd never make. The deductions, the transfers, the missing documentation, all pointing to me as the responsible party. It was almost elegant in its cruelty. He'd left me not just with absence, but liability. I laid the pages side by side, my pulse thrumming in my ears. He'd filed false claims under my name, used my SSN, my credentials. Everything that made me legitimate, he'd weaponized. The kitchen clock ticked loud enough to sound like accusation. I reached for my phone almost out of instinct. There was a time when I'd have called him for help with something like this. Now the thought made my stomach turn. I scrolled past his last message. "You're making a mistake." I didn't delete it. Not yet. It was evidence now, another fragment of the story he couldn't rewrite. Instead, I took photos of the audit notice, uploaded them to my Phase 1 folder, and attached a note, "Official confirmation received, fraud confirmed." The words steadied me. Documentation meant control. Still fear had a smell, something sharp and metallic like ozone before a storm. It clung to the air as I reread the letter. Potential legal action if not resolved. Evidence of misrepresentation. The language was clinical, but my body understood the danger before my brain did. I was in his mess legally and financially. The phone rang, breaking the silence. Marcy's voice crackled through. "You sound off. What's wrong?" The letter came. "Open it yet?" I did. A pause. "Read it to me." I read the first paragraph, my voice steady, until the words "joint liability" caught in my throat. "Okay," she said slowly. "Listen to me. You're not going to panic. We're going to get ahead of this. You've got documentation. He doesn't know what you have. What if they think I was involved? Then we prove you weren't. You've got timestamps, copies, records. You just need to stay quiet until we talk to someone official. No phone calls to him, no emails." Her confidence held me together. "Marcy." "Yeah." If I freeze, promise you'll tell me what to do next. I will, she said softly. But you won't freeze Claire. You've already started winning. You just don't feel it yet. After she hung up, I folded the letter neatly, slid it into a plastic sleeve, and filed it under a new label, Active Case Evidence. The sound of the binder snapping shut echoed in the still kitchen. By afternoon, my nerves had settled into something colder clarity. I logged into our old shared bank account, half expecting it to be closed. It wasn't. The balance was low, nearly empty, but one transaction from 2 weeks ago caught my eye. A transfer to a company I didn't recognize, Ward Tech Solutions, LLC. I clicked the details. The business address was a P.O. box. The account holder's name, E. Ward. He was still using the system, still feeding the same lie even after leaving me to carry its weight. I took a screenshot and whispered, "Got you." It wasn't anger in my voice. It was relief. The moment you see the whole shape of a lie, it loses half its power. I drafted an email to myself, a digital journal. He's still active, using shell companies. Found proof through online banking. Save evidence. Then I encrypted the folder and saved a backup to a drive Marcy had given me years ago for emergencies. I guess this qualified. Around 5, I poured a glass of wine I didn't taste and stood by the window watching the street. The same mail truck passed again, same driver, same rhythm. Everything outside looked normal. Neighbors walking dogs, porch lights flicking on. But my world had split quietly and visibly into before and after. Before I'd built a life on trust. After I was building a case. As dusk thickened, I gathered the papers and set them on the table beside last week's printouts. Together they told a story, his pattern my silence, the slow rise of truth. I could almost see the narrative form itself, beginning, middle, betrayal. The only part missing was the ending, and this time I would write it. The doorbell startled me. I froze, heart quick. When I looked through the peephole, no one was there. Only an envelope on the porch mat smaller than the IRS one, unmarked except for my name in familiar handwriting. I opened the door slowly. The evening air was cool, carrying the scent of cut grass. I bent, picked it up, closed the door behind me. Inside the envelope was a single page. No greeting, no signature. Just one line written in his slanted hand. "Stop digging." My hands trembled, but my mind didn't. He knew I was looking, and that meant I was close enough to scare him. I slipped the note into the binder, labeled it Threat 1, and took a deep breath. Fear hummed in my veins, but beneath it, something steadier took root: resolve. He'd built his empire on my trust. Now I'd dismantle it with my silence. I didn't sleep that night. The letter and Ethan's warning note sat side by side on the table like two ghosts staring each other down. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw his handwriting, tilted, confident, almost elegant. Stop digging. The words shouldn't have frightened me as much as they did. He wasn't here. He couldn't touch me. But the fear wasn't about what he could do now. It was the echo of what he'd already done, the quiet erosion that starts long before you realize you're being buried. I made coffee at 2 a.m. and opened my notebook. Instead of writing numbers or transactions, I wrote memories. Dates, phrases, moments that had slipped through the cracks. I needed to remember how he'd built the illusion so perfectly that I mistook control for love. The first memory was small. Dinner 5 years ago. I'd noticed a discrepancy on our joint credit card, a charge from a hotel in Denver. Client meeting, he'd said. I joked about the spa package listed below it, expecting him to laugh. Instead, he'd looked up sharply and said, "Do you ever stop questioning me?" The tone was light, but the message landed. I'd apologized. He'd smiled and reached across the table, touching my wrist. "You overthink everything, Claire. It's why you're good at numbers, but it'll kill you in life." That night, I deleted the charge from my mind. I told myself love meant trust. I turned the page in my notebook and kept writing. The second memory, the missing deposit from my client, the one he'd promised to check on. When I'd pressed, he'd sighed, exasperated. "Do you even hear how you sound? Suspicious all the time?" It's exhausting. He'd always used calmness as a weapon. The quieter his tone, the more foolish I felt. Another page. Another flash, the night he convinced me to sign a temporary authorization form so he could expedite a tax refund. I'd hesitated. He'd leaned close, eyes soft. "You know I'd never do anything to hurt us." And I'd believed him because I wanted to, because admitting doubt felt like betrayal. Now, under the harsh kitchen light, every one of those moments looked different, less like partnership, more like grooming. The clock read 3:47 when I finally pushed the notebook away. The house was so quiet, I could hear the pipes hum. I rubbed my temples, my thoughts looping. How much had I ignored? How often had I said yes, just to keep the peace? My phone vibrated once, an email notification. I almost ignored it, but habit made me check. It was from Ethan's old accountant, the one who'd handled his business filings years ago. Subject: re-documentation request. No message, just an attachment. I hesitated, then downloaded it. Inside was a scanned PDF and old correspondence between Ethan and the accountant. It read like a blueprint of betrayal. He'd given instructions to streamline deductions through Claire's business entity for joint efficiency. Legal-sounding words for fraud. My heart pounded. The timestamp was 2 years old. I'd been sitting in the next room that night watching some show, probably humming along to the theme song, while he quietly erased me. That's the cruelty of gaslighting. It doesn't destroy you in one blow. It convinces you to hand over the hammer. I printed the document and added it to the binder. The sound of the printer was rhythmic, almost soothing. Each page was both evidence and confession. I stood at the window watching the dark horizon lighten slightly with the first suggestion of dawn. I whispered his words aloud, just to hear how they sounded now stripped of their charm. "You're overreacting. You don't understand finance. You're too emotional to handle stress." One by one I said them, and one by one I took them apart like pulling nails from an old wall. By sunrise I was drained but clear-headed. I'd built my own kind of clarity, a timeline of manipulation, financial and emotional, drawn not just from spreadsheets, but from the scars of memory. At 7, I called Marcy. She answered on the second ring, already awake. "You sound like you've been up all night," she said. I was. "Find something new." I found everything. Just not all in files. "What do you mean?" I wrote it down. The way he made me feel. The words he used. I need it in the record, Marcy. Not just what he did, but how. She was silent for a beat. "That's good," she said finally. "That's how you reclaim the story. Numbers show what he took. Memories show how he got away with it." Her words landed like an anchor. "I'll come by tonight," she added. "We'll talk next steps." After we hung up, I stepped outside. The air was cold, sharp, real. The world felt wider than it had in months. I realized I hadn't truly breathed since the day Ethan left. On the porch, the morning paper lay untouched. For the first time, I picked it up without scanning for his name in the business section. The silence inside my head wasn't empty anymore. It was calm. Still fear lingered at the edges. That note, "Stop digging," sat in my mind like a splinter. If he knew I'd uncovered the fraud, he might know more. Maybe he had someone watching, or maybe that was paranoia talking. Gaslighting leaves you doubting your own shadow. I went back inside, locked the door, and glanced again at the binder on the table. It was thick now, layered with proof and memory. And somewhere in that weight, something shifted. He'd spent years convincing me I was too fragile to handle the truth. Now the truth was the only thing keeping me upright. Before heading to work, I opened the first notebook, the one labeled Audit Plan. Under Step 3, Stay Quiet, I added a new line. Step 4, Remember everything. It wasn't revenge that kept me moving anymore. It was reclamation. The past wasn't gone, it was archived. And like any record, it could be reviewed, corrected, rewritten. Marcy arrived that evening carrying her laptop and a legal pad. She moved through my kitchen like it was an office, calm, efficient, unfazed by the mess of folders and papers spread across the table. The binder was nearly 2 inches thick now. Numbers, screenshots, printouts, a growing monument to deception. "You've been busy," she said, glancing at the piles. "I don't know how to stop," I admitted. "Good. Don't." She opened her laptop, typing quickly. "You said there were recurring transfers. Show me." I pulled up the files on my own screen and pointed to a column of identical payment amounts, $4, $800, sent every other Friday to FW Consulting LLC. "Never heard of them," I said. "Neither have I." Marcy frowned. "Let's check the state business registry." I watched her fingers fly across the keyboard. Within minutes, a listing appeared. FW Consulting LLC, registered under Ethan Ward, managing member. I felt my stomach drop even though I'd expected it. "That's him," I whispered. She nodded. "He used a shell company, probably to launder the money he took from you." I sat back, breath catching. For months I'd told myself I was unlucky, careless, naive. But this was deliberate architecture. He designed it so that every dollar he stole looked like a legitimate transaction, a harmless fee. Marcy turned her screen toward me. "You see this?" She pointed to the business start date, 3 months before your joint tax filing. He planned this long before he left. The truth hit like a slap, but beneath the sting was something else: clarity. He hadn't ruined my life impulsively. He'd built my downfall the way he built everything, strategically. "I want to shut it down," I said. "Expose it." "Not yet," Marcy cautioned. "We need more. You'll only get one shot at him, Claire. When you move, it has to be airtight." Her words made sense, but patience tasted bitter. She reached across the table, squeezing my hand. "You're doing everything right. Quiet. Careful. Just keep collecting." After she left, the house felt too still again. I stared at the screen, rereading his company's name until the letters blurred. FW Consulting. Fake initials for a fake business. The kind of irony he'd appreciate. I clicked on the linked address, a shared office space in downtown Chicago. The company website was blank, no contact page, no staff list, no portfolio. Just a stock image of skyscrapers and a tagline, "Integrity in every transaction." I almost laughed. Integrity. Still, I took screenshots of every page, including the metadata. Then I dug deeper: public records, client invoices, even LinkedIn. He'd listed himself as a financial consultant with private partners in multiple states. I recognized 2 of the names. They were my old clients. He hadn't just stolen from me, he'd used my contacts, my reputation. Something inside me shifted, the last thread of denial snapping. This wasn't personal betrayal anymore. It was professional theft, character assassination. I opened my notebook and wrote in block letters, "He used my name to build his business." I underlined it twice. The air in the room thickened. For the first time since he left, I didn't feel afraid of him. I felt angry, clearly, without guilt. That anger propelled me into motion. I printed everything I'd found, organizing the documents by category: transfers, shell company, data, client overlaps. Then I added sticky notes with short summaries in neat handwriting. When I finished, I realized my hands weren't trembling anymore. My movements were precise, deliberate. Control. At midnight, I decided to verify one last detail: the client overlap. I emailed one of my old clients under the pretense of updating their contact info. The reply came fast. "Oh, we thought you and Ethan were still working together. He reached out last year about managing our new account." My jaw tightened. He hadn't just stolen my money, he'd stolen my credibility. I saved the email thread and labeled it evidence, misrepresentation. When I finally stepped away from the computer, my reflection in the window startled me. The tiredness in my face had turned into something sharper: focus. I made tea, sat at the table, and looked at everything spread before me: pages, notes, evidence. For months, he'd built an illusion of stability while quietly emptying our life behind it. But illusions collapse under inspection. As I sipped the tea, I remembered the first time I'd realized Ethan was charming in that effortless way people mistake for honesty. He'd once told me, "People trust what sounds confident." Now I understood the truth buried in that line: confidence was his camouflage. By 1 a.m., I had everything compiled. I slid the last page into the binder, labeling the new section FW Consulting Fraud Correlation. Then I closed the cover, pressing down until it clicked. The click felt final, like closing a door he'd kept open too long. Before heading to bed, I drafted an outline for next steps. 1. Verify shell company's transactions. 2. Contact tax attorney anonymously. 3. Do not engage Ethan. 4. Maintain silence. The last one, as always, was non-negotiable. Still lying in bed later, I couldn't silence my thoughts. His note. "Stop digging" felt almost laughable now. He'd spent years convincing me to doubt myself, to shrink every time he raised his voice. But the silence he once used to control me was now mine to wield. He could threaten, deny, disappear, but the truth was already out of his hands. Before sleep finally took me, I whispered one promise into the dark: "I'm not stopping." And for the first time, I didn't sound afraid. By Thursday morning, the folder marked FW Consulting Fraud Correlation was so thick it barely closed. I sat at the kitchen table staring at it while the coffee maker gurgled. For the first time in months, I wasn't afraid of what I might find. I was afraid of what would happen when someone else finally saw it. Marcy had insisted I meet an attorney. "You need someone who knows how to weaponize proof," she'd said, "not just collect it." So that afternoon, I found myself riding the elevator to the 9th floor of a downtown office building that smelled faintly of lemon polish and expensive printers. The brass plaque beside the frosted door read, "Benson and Hale Tax Law." A young receptionist smiled without really seeing me. "Ms. Hensley, Mr. Benson will be right with you." The waiting room was quiet, except for the hum of an aquarium filter. Inside the glass tank, silver fish moved in synchronized loops, calm, contained, unaware of the glass holding them. I wondered if that's what I'd looked like for years, swimming in pretty circles, thinking it was freedom. Ms. Hensley. The man who appeared was mid-40s, trim suit, kind eyes that had seen too many messy divorces. I'm Daniel Benson. Let's talk. He gestured me into an office lined with framed diplomas and neat stacks of tax codes. No family photos, just order. I liked that. I placed the binder on his desk. Everything's in here, I said. Bank records, falsified returns, forged signatures, even the shell company. He flipped the cover open and skimmed the first few pages. I watched his expression shift from polite curiosity to quiet focus. Then came a small, almost imperceptible smile, the kind people make when puzzle pieces click into place. Ms. Hensley, he said, tapping a document, you've done more investigative work than most auditors I know. I just followed the numbers. That's exactly what they never expect. He leaned back, lacing his fingers. What you're describing fits under financial coercion and identity misuse. Unfortunately, because you filed jointly, the IRS still sees you as liable, at least for now. The room seemed to tilt slightly. So I pay for his crime. Not necessarily. If we can prove you acted under duress, that he handled all filings, and you had limited access, we can separate the liability. It's difficult, but possible. I exhaled slowly. What does that take? Documentation of control. Emails, texts, even small comments that show he isolated you from financial decisions. I thought of the notebook on my table filled with his phrases. You're overreacting. You don't understand finance. Each line suddenly felt like evidence, not humiliation. Benson must have read the change in my face. You have that look people get when they realize the truth is on their side, he said. It's rare. He printed out a short contract explaining retainers and confidentiality. The pen he offered me felt heavier than it should, but my hand didn't shake as I signed. Next step, he said, sliding a card across the desk, we prepare a statement for the IRS. Quietly. You'll provide copies of your proof, and we'll position you as a cooperating witness, not a defendant. A witness, I repeated, tasting the word. It sounded strange but clean. As I gathered my binder, he added, one more thing. Don't contact him, not even once. The moment you engage, you lose control of the narrative. I wasn't planning to. He smiled again, measured approving. Good. Silence unnerves men like him. Outside, the air smelled like rain on hot pavement. The city buzzed, oblivious. I walked to the parking garage with the contract tucked under my arm, feeling lighter and heavier at once. Halfway home, my phone buzzed, unknown number. I let it ring out. A voicemail appeared a minute later. I didn't have to listen to know whose voice it was. Still, I pressed play through the car's speaker. Claire Ethan said, smooth as ever. I hear you've been talking to people. That's a mistake. You know how these things look when couples start blaming each other. Let's meet. I can fix this. I laughed out loud, a short, incredulous sound that startled even me. Couples. He still framed it as partnership, as if stealing $100,000 and forging signatures were marital hiccups. I hit save. Evidence. When I got home, the house felt different, less like a refuge, more like a command center. I placed the binder on the table, opened my notebook, and wrote a new section header, Phase 2 Legal Coordination. Underneath, I listed what Benson needed: timeline of financial control, examples of coercion, corroboration from Marcy if possible. The list steadied me. Lists always did. I brewed tea and sat in the quiet. Outside, the rain started soft, persistent. It drummed against the windows like fingertips keeping time. I thought about Benson's phrase, silence unnerves men like him. He was right. Ethan had always filled silence with explanation, charm noise. He didn't know what to do when someone stopped responding. That night, I wrote my first official statement draft. I described the missing funds, the forged documents, the note that said, "Stop digging." I kept my tone clinical, no adjectives, no emotion, just fact after fact, each one a nail closing his coffin. When I finished, I read it aloud, practicing for when I'd have to say it to someone official. My voice sounded steady, almost detached like an accountant reviewing quarterly losses. Maybe that's what healing looked like, accounting for everything you'd lost until the numbers finally balanced. Before bed, I placed the signed retainer in the binder's front pocket and labeled it Benson Council of Record. Then I closed the cover. For months, I'd been auditing a life I thought I understood. Now, for the first time, I wasn't just uncovering the damage, I was rebuilding the ledger under my own name. When I turned off the lights, the printer's indicator blinked softly across the room, a green pulse in the dark. It looked almost like a heartbeat. Tomorrow, the real audit would begin. It had been a week since I'd met Benson. The days settled into a rhythm: coffee at dawn, a few hours of document review, then phone updates with his office. The house stayed quiet except for the printer always printing something: emails, statements, proof. The calm wasn't peace yet, but it was order, and that was close enough. On Thursday evening, the doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone. Through the frosted glass, I saw the outline of a young woman, her posture cautious but steady. When I opened the door, Jenna Ward stood there, Ethan's daughter. She was 23 now, maybe 24, dressed in business casual armor, blazer jeans, neutral heels. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. "Hi, Claire," she said. "Can I come in?" For a moment, I just looked at her. The last time I'd seen Jenna was the night before Ethan left. She'd stood behind him while he packed a bag, avoiding my eyes, pretending to check her phone. I remembered how I'd tried to hug her, how she'd stiffened, whispering, "He says you'll understand." Now she was here holding a leather purse and an expression that looked too composed for comfort. I stepped aside. "Sure, come in." She walked into the kitchen and glanced at the binder on the table. "Wow," she said lightly. "You still do your own bookkeeping." I ignored the jab. "Would you like some coffee?" She shook her head. "I just came from class. I can't stay long." We stood in the same silence that used to hang between us during dinners, Ethan talking, both of us pretending to listen. Finally, she said, "Dad told me you're going through something with the IRS. Is that what he calls it?" I asked. Her jaw tightened. "He said there were misunderstandings." "Misunderstandings," I repeated, letting the word hang, "like forging my signature or draining our account." Color rose in her cheeks. "He said you agreed to that, to help with cash flow." I almost laughed. "Does that sound like something I'd do?" She hesitated. "He said you were unstable after he left, that you—" She stopped, embarrassed. "That I— What, Jenna?" Her eyes darted to the binder again. "That you were obsessed, that you're trying to ruin him." I leaned against the counter. "And you came here to confirm it?" Her voice faltered. "I came because— I don't know. He's been weird lately. Nervous. I've never seen him like that. I thought maybe you could tell me why." That at least was honest. "Has he mentioned his company?" I asked. "FW Consulting." Her eyes flickered surprise, breaking through the mask. "You know about that. I know everything about that." She sank into a chair, exhaling. "He said it was new business." But lately he's been deleting emails, taking calls outside. He told me not to come over anymore. I thought maybe it was because of you. It is because of me, I said quietly. He's scared. She looked up, startled. Scared of you? Of the truth? For a long moment, she studied me the way a student studies a test question, searching for the right answer. You sound different, she said. Calmer. I am different, I said. I finally stopped apologizing. Something in her posture softened. He always said you were dramatic. But you don't look dramatic. No, I look like someone who stopped believing him. We sat in silence, the clock ticking between us. I remembered when she was 16, sitting on that same stool asking me how to do her taxes for her first job. I'd stayed up late showing her how to track expenses. She'd been proud when her numbers balanced. I wondered if she remembered. Jenna, I said carefully, if anyone from the IRS contacts you, you need to tell them the truth. That he controlled everything, accounts, returns, passwords. She looked uneasy. Would that hurt him? It might, but it could save you. Her hands tightened around her purse strap. He's still my dad. I know. That was the truth, and the Trapp family loyalty built like a cage. I couldn't fault her for being caught inside it. After a moment, she said, he told me you'd say things like that. And what do you think? I don't know, she whispered. But you seem steady. And he's been paranoid. Maybe that means something. I walked her to the door. It does. Outside, the evening light was gold and thin. She paused on the porch. Claire. Yes. Were you happy with him? The question surprised me. Sometimes I said, but mostly I was busy keeping him happy. She nodded slowly. That sounds familiar. Then she left, heels tapping down the driveway, each step quicker than the last. I closed the door and leaned against it, letting the quiet return. The air still carried her perfume, something floral, nervous. I wasn't sure if she'd come as a spy or as a daughter trying to understand, but it didn't matter. She'd seen enough. Doubt had been planted. On the table, my phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. Did she stop by? No name. Just that. I stared at it for a full minute before replying, yes. Another ping. Don't talk to her again. I deleted both texts and took screenshots first, of course. Evidence. Then I turned the phone face down. The kitchen felt colder suddenly. Through the window I could see the reflection of my own face, tired but clear. Ethan was starting to feel cornered. His control was slipping. I made a note in my notebook, Jenna visit, proof he's monitoring, possible witness. The word witness steadied me. I turned off the lights and walked upstairs. From the landing I could still see the binder on the table, open slightly, its pages catching the streetlight. For months, that binder had represented failure, humiliation, loss. Now it looked like armor. Downstairs, the refrigerator hummed softly. Somewhere outside, a car door slammed. Then silence. I exhaled. The night didn't feel threatening anymore, just watchful. Let him watch. I had nothing left to hide. 2 nights after Jenna's visit, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Maybe it was paranoia. Maybe it was instinct finally waking up. Either way, I double-checked every lock before I sat down at my desk. The binder was there, the printer silent for once. I'd promised Benson I wouldn't reach out to Ethan, but I hadn't promised not to keep looking. The old desktop computer sat in the corner of my office, the one Ethan used before he switched to his sleek new laptop. It hadn't been turned on in a year. I pressed the power button. The fan coughed, then hummed to life. A faint scent of dust and metal filled the room, the smell of dormant secrets. While the screen flickered awake, I remembered how possessive he'd been about this machine. "Don't mess with my files, Claire. Everything's backed up," he'd said once, laughing. I hadn't realized how literal that was. The desktop loaded, cluttered with folders named invoices, photos, vacation plans, ordinary camouflage. But one caught my eye, an external drive labeled Archive UW still plugged into the port. I clicked it open. Inside were hundreds of subfolders, client data receipts, PDFs, scanned signatures. Every bit of his world compressed into neat digital order. My pulse quickened. I opened the most recent folder, 2020, quarter 4. Each document bore my initials. CH typed neatly into forms I'd never seen. There were fake consulting contracts, refund requests, even fake tax letters approved by my non-existent signature. It wasn't just theft. It was identity laundering. I grabbed my notebook and started listing file names, noting modification dates, then moved them into a new folder on my own encrypted drive. Evidence multiplied before my eyes. Then halfway down the list, something different, personal, backups, zip. I hesitated before opening it. My heart hammered as the progress bar crept across the screen. When the folder finally appeared, I froze. Inside were scanned images, pages from my journal. Not the financial one, but my private notebook from years ago, the one I'd lost after we moved houses. He'd scanned my handwriting, archived my thoughts like property, each page labeled time-stamped stored. I felt the ground tilt under me. Betrayal wasn't new anymore, but this was deeper, intimate. He hadn't just stolen money, he'd stolen voice, the unguarded version of me. For a long moment, I couldn't move. The hum of the computer sounded like breathing. Then anger broke through the paralysis. I selected the journal folder, compressed it, and saved it under a new name, Recovered Self. The irony wasn't lost on me. As I kept digging, I found a folder labeled FW Project the Shell Company. Inside were invoices, payment ledgers, and a spreadsheet titled Revenue Allocation. I opened it. Columns of numbers, dates, initials. My initials beside nearly every transaction. But one cell stood out. Transfer $100,000, $1,000. Source joint savings. Memo personal loan. CH. There it was. The missing sum recorded in his own words. I leaned closer, reading the metadata created by Eward admin, last modified a week before he left. Proof. Absolute. A sound escaped me, half laugh, half sob. The kind that happens when relief and rage collide. I copied everything, encrypted the files, and uploaded them to a secure cloud account Benson had set up. Then I called him, leaving a message. "You'll want to see what I found." Afterward, I just sat there staring at the glowing screen. The house was silent except for the faint tick of the wall clock. That's when the printer across the room came to life. I flinched. I hadn't touched it. The screen showed document printing 1 of 1. A page slid out slowly. My throat tightened as I walked over. Across the top in large, bold letters, "I told you to stop." No signature. Just that. My body went cold, but my mind stayed sharp. Ethan had remote access. He must have linked the printer when he still lived here. He was watching, or trying to. I yanked the power cord out of the wall. The machine died instantly, paper still half fed through the rollers. I tore it free, folded it, and added it to the binder's back pocket under threats. My hands trembled, but not from fear, adrenaline, maybe defiance. Then I went back to the computer, disconnected Wi-Fi, and kept working offline. If he wanted to scare me, he'd pick the wrong woman to intimidate. By dawn, I had cataloged everything: fraud records, identity, misuse, the personal journal scans. I labeled each section for Benson's review. 1. Digital evidence of fraud. 2. Identity theft handwriting scans. 3. Threat documentation. The structure calmed me. Numbers had always done that. Even chaos made sense when it was organized. At 6 a.m., I made breakfast for the first time in weeks. Eggs, toast, nothing fancy. The smell of butter and coffee softened the edges of the night. Through the kitchen window, sunrise bled gold across the rooftops. For once, it didn't feel like an ending. I checked my phone. A text from Marcy blinked on the screen. Saw Jenna on campus today. She looked shaken. You okay? I smiled faintly. Better than okay, I typed back. I have everything I need. Then, as an afterthought, he made a mistake. He forgot his own archive. When Benson called an hour later, his voice carried restrained excitement. Claire, you realize this changes everything. He documented his own fraud. With the timestamps, this isn't just circumstantial, it's admission. Good, I said. I'll send instructions for the chain of custody. Keep that drive safe and don't reconnect your network. We'll handle the rest. Understood. After the call, I stood in the doorway of my office watching the morning light spill across the scattered papers. It looked almost peaceful, like sunlight in a museum of broken promises. He'd built his empire on arrogance, and arrogance leaves footprints. All I'd done was follow them. Before shutting down the old computer, I opened one last document. It was untitled, nearly empty, except for a single sentence he must have written to himself years ago. Always control the narrative. I stared at the words until they blurred, then smiled. Not anymore, I whispered. Then I deleted the file, emptied the trash, and powered the machine down. The silence afterward wasn't heavy this time. It felt earned. The day after I found Ethan's archive, the house felt too still. Every sound, the fridge motor, the creak of the floorboards, had a shadow behind it. I kept the blinds half closed and my phone on silent. Benson had told me he was submitting the first packet of evidence. All I needed to do was wait. Waiting is harder than fighting. It leaves too much room for memory. I was halfway through organizing receipts when my phone buzzed across the table. Unknown number. I almost ignored it, then saw the city code, Denver. His city. The screen lit again, E. Ward calling. I shouldn't have answered, but silence has limits. I needed to hear his voice just once, without the filter of memory. I hit accept. Claire, he said, smooth as oil. Finally. The sound of him knocked the air from my lungs. It was amazing how quickly the body remembers fear. What do you want? I said. Let's skip the dramatics, he replied. You've made some noise and people are asking questions that don't need answers. I sent everything to my attorney. You'll have your chance to respond. He laughed softly. Your attorney. You really think that paper pusher can fix this? Claire, listen to me. If you back off now, we can settle this quietly. No courts, no embarrassment. I said nothing. The pause unsettled him. He filled it like he always had. You're being manipulated. That lawyer, that friend, what's her name, Marcy? They're feeding your paranoia. You used to trust me. I trusted you because you made sure I didn't trust myself. The silence on his end changed sharper, brittle. Watch your tone. You forged my signature. You stole from me. I built a business that supported both of us. With my name. His breath hitched. I could almost see his jaw clench. You don't understand how this world works. You think the IRS cares about your feelings, they'll bury you. But I can still make it disappear. You can't make me disappear anymore. That was the first real truth I'd ever spoken to him. He inhaled slowly, recalibrating. You've always had a temper. That's why you need someone rational in charge. I almost laughed. If you call stealing rational. A beat of silence, then his voice dropped lower. You're out of your depth, Claire. Stop digging before you drown. The phrase was familiar. His printer message, the note on my porch. Confirmation. I pressed record on my phone. Is that a threat? I asked. He exhaled, impatient. A warning. Thanks for clarifying. I ended the call. The room was quiet except for the blood rushing in my ears. I stared at the phone's red recording saved icon. Evidence. Clear, concise, incriminating. When I replayed the voicemail later, I realized something else. His voice cracked halfway through the call. Not rage, panic. For the first time, he was afraid of me. I sent the file to Benson's secure portal with a short message, direct threat, verbal confirmation of fraud awareness. He replied almost instantly. Good work. Don't engage again. He's losing control. Losing control. The phrase stayed with me. That evening, I stepped outside to clear my head. The sky was low and pink, the kind of sunset that looks like a warning more than a blessing. The neighbor's dog barked, and a wind chime clattered in the distance. Everything ordinary, but newly vivid. I felt the shift something inside me had locked into place. Back inside, I replayed the conversation in my mind, dissecting it line by line. His rhythm was off. The confidence he used to wear like armor had cracks. Each word had been both plea and threat. I opened my notebook and wrote, when abusers lose control of the story, they start narrating the other person's downfall. I underlined it twice. The next morning, Benson called. We'll file the coercion affidavit tomorrow, he said. That recording seals it. He admitted to the threats and the fraudulent filings. After that, communication will go through us only. I nodded, though he couldn't see me. He's unraveling. That's when they get loud. Stay silent. After we hung up, I sat at the kitchen table tracing the rim of my mug. Silence had always been his weapon, his calm against my doubt. Now it was mine. Around noon, a delivery truck stopped outside. I watched from the window as a courier dropped a small padded envelope at the door. No return address. My heartbeat quickened. Inside was a single flash drive. No note. I plugged it into my laptop cautiously offline. One folder appeared, photos. Inside, pictures of me. Taken through windows on the porch at the grocery store. Recent. I forced myself to breathe evenly, saving each image to an encrypted drive before ejecting the USB. Proof, not panic. When I called Benson, he didn't sound surprised. That's intimidation, he said. Classic tactic. We'll report it with the affidavit. You did the right thing. After I hung up, I closed every curtain in the house. But fear didn't flood me this time, it sharpened me. He wanted me to break the silence, to call to plead. Instead, I documented every detail: envelope texture, postmark, timestamp, flash drive serial number. Control lived in documentation. By evening, calm returned. I sat at my desk, notebook open, pen steady. For the first time, I wasn't writing about him. I was writing instructions for myself. Rule 1. Never explain to a liar. Rule 2. Record everything. Rule 3. Power is the space between knowing and speaking. Outside rain began to fall soft against the windows. I let it fill the silence he used to dominate. When my phone buzzed again, I didn't flinch. I didn't even look. I just turned off the ringer and kept writing. He'd wanted to remind me that he was watching. But the truth was simple. I was watching too, and I was keeping score. I didn't sleep the night before the meeting. The ceiling fan spun slow, the room smelling faintly of paper and ink from all the evidence piled on my desk. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the red waveform of his recorded voice. Stop digging before you drown. I kept reminding myself tomorrow he'd be the one gasping for air. By morning, the sky was the pale gray of unfinished business. I put on a navy dress, the one I used to wear to client meetings, and tied my hair back. I wanted to look unremarkable. Invisibility was armor. I slipped the flash drive of evidence into a manila envelope labeled "Only Documentation Set A." Benson met me at the Federal Building downtown. He looked calm, briefcase in one hand, coffee in the other. "You ready?" he asked. Ready enough. Inside, the IRS Investigations Division didn't look like I imagined. No metal detectors, no drama, just beige walls, fluorescent lights, the hum of bureaucracy. An investigator named Sophia Morales led us to a small conference room. She was maybe my age, sharp-eyed, but kind. "Ms. Hensley," she said, shaking my hand. "Mr. Benson's told me a bit. I'd like to hear it from you." I placed the envelope on the table. Everything's in there. Documents, digital files, threats, recordings. He filed fraudulent returns under my name and created shell accounts tied to me. Sophia opened the folder, carefully scanning the top sheet. "How long were you married?" 12 years. "And you discovered the discrepancies when?" "About 2 months ago. I've been compiling evidence since." Her eyes flicked to mine, assessing. "Most people panic when they get an audit letter. You built a case." "I'm a bookkeeper," I said. "Numbers are how I breathe." A faint smile. "That'll make my job easier." Benson spoke next, his tone measured. "We're filing under financial coercion and identity misuse. The recordings corroborate her lack of consent and his ongoing intimidation." Sophia nodded. "We'll authenticate the files. Once verified, the liability shifts. He'll be the subject, not you." The phrase "the subject" hung in the air like a benediction. I exhaled, realizing I'd been holding my breath for months. Sophia continued flipping pages, pausing at the printed threat from the printer. "He accessed your home network remotely." "Yes." "Good. That's traceable." Her efficiency was soothing. Every annotation, every checkbox, another layer between me and the chaos he'd built. When the interview ended, she said, "We'll be in touch within 10 days. You've done exceptionally thorough work, Ms. Hensley. You probably saved us 6 months." "6 months of my life, too," I said quietly. Outside sunlight hit the marble steps so bright it made me squint. Benson handed me a small USB copy of what we filed. "Keep it off your Wi-Fi." "I already do." He smiled faintly. "Then I think we're done here for now." We parted at the corner. He headed for his car, and I walked the few blocks to mine, feeling both lighter and strangely empty. For the first time since all this began, there was nothing left to investigate. At home, I set the envelope on the table where the binder used to sit. The binder itself was gone sealed, submitted out of my hands. The space looked naked without it. I brewed tea, sat down, and listened to the quiet. Real quiet. No phone buzzing, no printer hum, no ghost of his voice echoing through the walls. Freedom didn't come with a bang. It came like this soft, almost anticlimactic, a space too wide to recognize. I picked up my pen and wrote a single line in the notebook that started it all: case transferred. Silence achieved. The words steadied me. That evening I walked to the lake near my neighborhood. The air smelled of rain and cut grass. Families were out, kids skipping stones, couples walking dogs. Ordinary life going on without permission. I sat on a bench and watched the ripples move across the water. For the first time, I didn't feel like I was on trial for my own mistakes. The guilt that had followed me, the what-ifs, the self-blame had thinned almost transparent. My phone buzzed once. Unknown number. I didn't look. Instead, I switched it off and slipped it into my pocket. Behind me, laughter drifted from a group of teenagers. The sound hit me in the chest, light, unguarded. I wondered if Jenna ever laughed like that. Maybe someday she would, when the story was no longer his to tell. When I got home, twilight had settled. I walked through each room, slowly turning on a lamp here, straightening a picture there. The house felt smaller now, but also more mine. In the office, I noticed the old desktop, still unplugged, dust beginning to settle on its surface. I thought about throwing it out, then decided to keep it as a reminder that the worst things can also become evidence. Before bed, I printed one final page: summary of action, all files submitted, investigation active, outcome pending. I placed it in the last empty sleeve of my notebook, then closed it gently. Lying in the dark, I listened to the distant sound of a train, steady, moving forward. He had taken money, years' confidence. But tonight, for the first time, he couldn't touch the quiet inside me. It wasn't revenge I wanted. It was restoration. And I finally had it. The call from Benson came on a Tuesday morning just as I was making coffee. "Claire," he said, his tone careful but threaded with energy. "It's happening. The investigation went public this morning. Federal charges, fraud, identity misuse, falsified returns. They're naming him." For a moment, I couldn't speak. The sound of the kettle filled the pause, a long hiss of steam. "Are you sure I'm looking at the docket now? Your name appears only as a cooperating witness." The words landed like a weight lifted off my chest. Cooperating witness. Not suspect, not accomplice witness. Benson continued. "Reporters will dig. You don't have to answer anything. We'll handle the statements." "Understood," I said quietly. When we hung up, I poured the coffee, but didn't drink it. Outside the neighborhood looked the same kids walking to the bus stop, a dog barking 2 houses over. Nothing in the world seemed to acknowledge that a story was breaking in my name. An hour later, Marcy called. "You've seen it?" she asked breathlessly. "I just heard. He's on the local business blog already. They're quoting the complaint, client funds, false deductions, the whole thing." "You did it, Claire. You actually did it." Her voice cracked with relief, and I realized mine was too. We laughed a little hysterically, like survivors at the edge of a fire. After we hung up, I opened my laptop. The headline was simple: "Financial Consultant Ethan Ward under federal investigation." The photo below it was one I'd taken years ago at some charity event. He was in a gray suit, smiling that practiced smile. I remembered the weight of his hand on my back that night, guiding me toward donors like a prop. I read the article twice, then closed the tab. I didn't need details. I already knew the story. Around noon, texts started coming, numbers I hadn't saved, people from our old circle. We're shocked. How are you holding up? If you need anything, call. I didn't respond to any of them. Polite curiosity masquerading as concern. Later, an email arrived from Jenna. Subject line: I'm sorry. Her message was short. I didn't believe you. I should have. I told the investigators what I knew. He's been hiding out since last night. I think you'll be okay now. J. I sat with that for a while, rereading it until the words blurred. The apology wasn't enough to erase the years between us, but it was something, a small bridge built on truth. In the afternoon, I went for a walk downtown. Every newsstand carried the same headline. People passed without looking, phones glowing in their hands. I half expected to feel triumph, but what I felt instead was stillness. There's no glory in being right about betrayal, only relief that it's finally visible. When I returned home, I found a voicemail on my phone. No number, just a recording that began mid-breath. Claire, he said. His voice was thinner now, frayed at the edges. They're twisting everything. You could stop this if you wanted. Say it was confusion. I never meant for it to. The message cut off. No apology, no ownership, just desperation. I saved it, automatically labeled final call, and slid the phone into a drawer. That night, I sat at the kitchen table where the binder used to be and opened a new notebook, clean pages unmarked. I titled it, Rebuilding. The first entry, freedom begins quietly. Outside, rain tapped against the windows. I left them open just enough to smell the storm. For so long, rain had sounded like confinement nights, waiting for his car in the driveway, the slow dread of another argument. Tonight it sounded like cleansing. By morning, 3 different networks were running the story. Benson texted, "No comment policy stands. Sit tight." I made breakfast, read a book, folded laundry. Normal things. Each task felt like a small act of reclamation. Around midday, Marcy came by with groceries. She dropped the bag on the counter and hugged me without asking. "It's strange," she said. "He's everywhere today, and you're finally nowhere in it." "I like nowhere," I said. We shared coffee, not talking much. She kept glancing at me as if expecting me to break apart, but I didn't. The cracks had already sealed themselves with purpose. Before she left, she touched my arm. "You know you could write about this someday. What it feels like when silence wins." I smiled. Maybe I already am. That evening I walked through the house room by room. In the study, the old desktop still sat unplugged. I dusted its top and draped a small cloth over it, its final shroud. In the kitchen, I cleared the table, leaving only a single plant in the center. Everywhere I looked, there was absence, but not the aching kind. More like space reclaimed. Before bed, I checked my email once more. Among the noise of updates and alerts was a short message from Sofia Morales, the investigator. "Case status, active cooperation appreciated. We'll keep you informed. Rest easy tonight." I closed my laptop and turned off the light. For the first time in years, I didn't flinch at the dark. There were no ghosts left to feed on it. Tomorrow, the world would keep talking about Ethan Ward, his crimes, his downfall, his name echoing across headlines. But my story had already moved past him. I had built a silence he couldn't enter, a life he couldn't touch. And that was louder than anything he'd ever said. 2 months after the charges went public, the world finally stopped saying his name. The headlines faded, the calls slowed, and the search results shifted from outrage to aftermath. Ethan Ward had become another cautionary tale in a world already full of them. But I was still here quietly rebuilding what he'd tried to erase. The first day I opened the door to my new office, I almost didn't recognize the feeling that came over me. It wasn't pride or relief, it was steadiness. The space was small, just 2 rooms above a bakery in the old part of town. The scent of sugar and yeast drifted up through the floorboards, grounding everything in the ordinary. I'd signed the lease under my maiden name, Claire Martin, a name with no attachments, no legal baggage, no echoes. On the frosted glass of the door, gold lettering read, Martin Financial Services, bookkeeping with integrity. It wasn't flashy, but it was honest. An honesty I'd learned was its own luxury. I unpacked the boxes myself. Ledgers, folders, pens, a potted fern Marcy insisted I bring for life energy. She was my first visitor that morning, carrying coffee and her usual practicality. Well, she said, looking around. You did it. It's small, I admitted. It's yours, she countered. That's the point. I smiled because she was right. Everything in this room had been chosen, not inherited or imposed. The desk, the light, the air, it all belonged to me. By noon, I already had my first client. A referral from Benson, actually a woman named Denise who ran a small flower shop. Her husband had left her with debt and chaos in the books. As she explained it, her voice shook the way mine used to. I don't even know where to start, she said. That's okay, I told her. We'll start where the truth starts on the page. She looked at me, then the way I'd once looked at Marcy, with the fragile hope that maybe someone finally understood. When she left, I closed her file gently and sat back. Helping her hadn't drained me, it had steadied me. The numbers made sense again, but more than that, so did I. Later that afternoon, Jenna came by. She looked older, somehow more grounded, less brittle. She held a paper bag in her hands. I brought muffins, she said. I gestured to the chair across from me. You didn't have to. I wanted to. They're from that bakery downstairs. The smell was too good to resist. We sat in a tentative silence for a while, eating muffins that were still warm. Finally, she said, They gave him 15 years. I nodded. I read. I testified. They showed me your files, what you found. I don't know how you did it. I stopped believing the version of me he told me I was. She looked down, twisting the edge of the bag. He told me you'd ruined him. I didn't ruin him, I said softly. I just stopped protecting the lie. She blinked fast, then laughed quietly, shaking her head. I used to think you were fragile. Now I get it, you were surviving. We sat together until the sun slipped low, casting gold light across the desk. Before she left, she hesitated in the doorway. I hope you don't mind if I stop by sometimes, she said. I don't really have many people left who knew both sides. I don't mind, I said. Just don't bring guilt. Bring coffee. She smiled, the first real one I'd seen from her, and nodded. After she left, I turned off the main light and sat alone in the soft glow from the window. Below the bakery, lights flickered on, and the smell of bread rose again, warm, clean, forgiving. I thought about everything that had brought me here, the spreadsheet, the late nights, the silence I'd built as a wall and then as a bridge. Survival had been the first act. Rebuilding was the second. I wasn't trying to erase the past anymore. I was learning to let it exist without running my life. On the wall above my desk, I pinned one page from my old binder, just one. The spreadsheet line where he'd transferred the $100,000 $1,000 labeled personal loan, CH. I'd highlighted it in gold ink and written beneath it, paid in full. It wasn't about the money, it was about the balance. Before locking up, I checked my email. A message from Benson sat at the top. Final restitution payments confirmed. Case closed. Congratulations, Claire. I read it twice, smiling without meaning to. The case was closed, but the story wasn't. It would live quietly in me, not as pain, but as proof that even ruins can be rebuilt into rooms that hold light. As I turned off the lights, my reflection in the office window caught my eye, older, steadier, unfamiliar in the best way. The kind of woman who knew the cost of silence, but chose it anyway when it meant peace. On the desk, the fern caught the last bit of sun, its leaves backlit, almost glowing. I thought of everything that had survived, the numbers, the notebooks, the voice that refused to stay buried. When I stepped outside, the bell above the bakery door chimed soft and ordinary. I walked to my car under the streetlights, the air cool, the city alive but no longer heavy. For years I'd lived like a ghost in my own story. Now I was visible again, and the light didn't scare me. Morning light spilled across the office, soft and golden. It caught the rim of my coffee cup, the neat stacks of folders, the framed business license on the wall that read, Martin Financial Services. Every time I saw that name, I felt something steady settle inside me, proof that the story had been rewritten under my own signature. I had a full schedule ahead, 2 client meetings, an afternoon call with a nonprofit that needed bookkeeping help, and a quiet dinner planned with Marcy. But for a moment, I just sat there watching the light crawl across the desk. The world outside moved fast again, traffic deadlines, laughter from the bakery below. But the rhythm inside these walls was mine alone. The past had become background noise, the hum of a machine I'd finally unplugged. At 10, I opened my email and saw a message from Sofia Morales, the investigator who'd handled my case. Subject: Case Closure. Notice: Ms. Martin, we wanted you to receive official confirmation that all proceedings regarding Ward v. the United States have concluded. The restitution process is complete. No further action is required. Congratulations on your cooperation and perseverance. I stared at the words, waiting for emotion to rise, but what came instead was stillness. The case was over. The number that had haunted every cell in my body, $100,000, no longer existed as loss. It was just math now, part of an equation already balanced. I printed the email, slipped it into a folder labeled Final, and wrote the date at the top. Then, almost without thinking, I whispered, Case closed. The printer clicked and fell silent again, its green light blinking like a heartbeat. Around noon, a woman named Denise dropped off a check. She'd been one of my first clients, the florist with the tangled books and the missing deposits. All caught up, she said, handing me the envelope. And thank you. Her eyes shone the way mine once had, tired but alive. You did the work, I told her. She laughed softly. Maybe. But you showed me where to start. After she left, I placed her check in the drawer and leaned back in my chair. Helping other women rebuild had become its own quiet justice. Every balanced ledger felt like one more piece of restitution, not from the government, not from him, but from life itself. The phone rang mid-afternoon. I almost didn't answer when I saw the restricted number, but curiosity won. Hello, silence. Then a breath. Claire. The voice was unmistakable, thinner now, rougher, but his. I said nothing. He filled the gap as always. I got your letter. I didn't send one. The legal notice then. They're closing it all. You won. I wasn't playing. A pause. You sound different. I am. He exhaled. They took everything. The company, The accounts. 15 years, Claire. Do you hate me enough to call that justice? I don't hate you, I said truthfully. You taught me something I couldn't have learned any other way. What's that? How to stop needing anyone's permission to be right. He laughed once, small, bitter. You always did have a gift for the dramatic. Goodbye, Ethan. Claire. But I'd already hung up. The dial tone hummed like a curtain closing. I sat for a while, letting the quiet fill the space he'd momentarily occupied. There was no rush of triumph, no cinematic satisfaction, just the gentle knowledge that he no longer had access to my time, my voice, or my peace. Later, when Marcy arrived for dinner, she noticed the printout on my desk. Case closed, she read aloud, smiling. Has a nice ring to it. It does. We ate takeout from the bakery downstairs, laughing about mundane things, bad traffic. Her latest client, the cat that kept stealing croissants off the counter. Ordinary conversation had become my favorite kind of luxury. When she left, I tidied up the office and locked the door. Outside, the evening air carried the smell of rain on concrete. The city shimmered in streetlight. For a moment, I stood there just breathing it in. Freedom without drama. Quiet without fear. At home, I lit a candle in the kitchen. The table was bare except for my notebook, the same one that had once been filled with panic and calculations. I opened to the very last page. Step 1. Identify anomalies. Step 2. Collect proof. Step 3. Stay quiet. Step 4. Remember everything. I added one final line beneath them. Step 5. Live a life he can't touch. Then I closed the cover. Through the window, lightning flickered far away, harmless, distant. I made tea, sipped it slowly, and let my thoughts drift to the future. New clients, maybe a small staff, perhaps a weekend trip with Marcy to the coast. Nothing grand, just days shaped by choice instead of reaction. Before going to bed, I checked the mailbox one last time. A thin white envelope waited inside. My name, Claire Martin, written neatly in blue ink. Inside was a final restitution notice from the court, payment fulfilled. Balance 0. I smiled, folded it once, and placed it between the pages of my notebook. Balance 0. For the first time, the words didn't sound like loss. They sounded like peace. Upstairs, I stood by the window, watching the rain start to fall soft and rhythmic. In the reflection, my face looked calm, older maybe, but certain. The woman staring back wasn't the same one who'd once trembled over a spreadsheet in the middle of the night. She'd become the keeper of her own books, financial, emotional, spiritual. The numbers finally matched the story. And somewhere far from here, a man who once defined my life was learning that silence, too, can be a verdict. I turned away from the glass, letting the rain speak for me. Tomorrow would come like any other day, clients' coffee, sunlight on the desk. But underneath it all would hum the quiet knowledge that I'd rebuilt something unbreakable, a life he could never touch.